Hello again. Hope you're doing well. I'm Hardleg Joe, if you didn't know, and today I'm going to be diving once more into the topic of philosophy. Specifically, I'm going to be laying out my own personal philosophy, as in the system of morality I use to guide my actions. I'm doing this for two main reasons. First is simple transparency. If I'm going to be making political videos where I ask you to take action, then I think it's important that you understand what I believe and what motivates my decisions. The second reason is simply that I think some of you might find it helpful. I've noticed that a lot of people these days don't seem to have any kind of structured philosophy. And as a result, they often seem aimless, depressed, uncertain. They don't know what to believe. I'm not going to pretend that my way of thinking is perfect or that I have all the answers, but this has brought stability and a sense of purpose to my life, so perhaps it can work for some of you. At the very least, maybe hearing me explain my moral framework out loud will give you some insight into how to build one of your own. If nothing else, it should be entertaining, so without further ado, let's begin. Now, this might seem a little silly, but when it comes to discussing such basic, fundamental ideas, I think that it helps to have a visual reference. In this case, I like to imagine my philosophy as a temple with three distinct parts: the foundation, the pillars, and the roof. The foundation is my axiom, the core idea which all my reasoning is built upon. If you're interested in learning about that term, I previously made a video all about axioms and how they shape our thinking. To oversimplify things, though, you can think of the axiom as the goal of the philosophy. This is what I hope to achieve by living my life in a certain way. Now, on top of the foundation, we have 4 pillars, which represent 4 systems that best support the axiom. You can think of these as the tools that we'll be using to accomplish our goal. Finally, at the very top, we have the roof, which is full of morals. These are the behaviors that best fit our systems. They're virtues that we should try to live by if we want our tools to work properly. So basically, we have the goal of life, the tools we use to achieve that goal, and how we need to behave in order for those tools to be used effectively. Put it all together, and you have a cohesive structure that represents one way to live your life. A philosophical framework that can guide your decision-making when things are uncertain. So now that you understand the framing, let's start at the bottom and work our way up. As I said before, the foundation of my temple is also the foundation of my reasoning, and it can be summed up in a single sentence. Humanity, as a species, should be preserved for as long as possible. That's it. I think humans are a unique animal, capable of making amazing things, far beyond the capabilities of any other known organism, and therefore, I want the human race to survive for as long as possible, to see what else they can make. It is a very broad idea. So much so that I think just about every other major religion and philosophy agrees with this. I mean, let me know if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's any widespread group that wants to see humans wiped from the face of the earth. If you believe in a god, it's safe to assume that your god wants humans to keep existing. That's why they put us here. And if you don't believe in God, then it's likely you want humans to keep existing, for one reason or another. I mean, it's an axiom, so I don't really have to defend it, but I just think it's worth pointing out how universally appealing this idea is. Because it means my philosophy is compatible with a lot of the other ones out there, at least on a very basic level. And that quality means it's really easy to find and recruit allies. There's always going to be some common ground for us to stand on, because so few people want to see humanity destroyed. But I digress. That is the foundation, and now that we have it, everything else comes as a logical result of that idea. So, let's start building. Okay, so I want humanity to survive for as long as possible. How do I ensure that happens? Well, for starters, I can't do it alone. Accomplishing just about anything requires teamwork, but accomplishing something that big is going to require a lot of teamwork. So much so that we wouldn't even call it a team anymore. We'd call it a society. Society is the biggest team. It is what you get when vast numbers of people all work together towards common goals, and it is essential for humanity's survival. Which is why every one of these pillars are systems for managing society. In fact, you can think of this whole section as society, because organizing together is the tool that allows our species to continue. These individual pillars are just different aspects of that tool. Keep that in mind as we go forward. Despite the fact that this is a personal philosophy, one of its core ideas is the acknowledgement that none of us can do it alone. We need other people to make civilization work, which is why communication and teamwork are the first things that go up here in the roof section. Remember that the roof represents morals. These are the behaviors that we can enact as individuals to ensure that the pillars function correctly. And even though we don't yet know the specifics of these pillars, the fact is, any kind of society is going to require teamwork and communication. I mean, that's essentially what society is. It's people working together and sharing information. So with all that in mind, the real question here is not, what can I personally do to ensure the survival of the human race, but instead, what can all of us do? Well, if you want to protect something, it helps to think of what might be able to harm it. What is a threat to us as a species? If we know what can kill us, then we can come up with a plan to fight it. Now there's two-ish things I can think of, which I'm going to represent visually as lightning bolts in the sky over our temple. These are the dangers to humanity, metaphorical storm clouds that threaten to destroy the foundation. If you want to know why we have built a temple in the first place, it is to protect against these threats. Threat number one is nature. Specifically, large-scale natural disasters. The kind that threaten the entire planet. Gamma ray bursts, supervolcanoes, climate change in general, and arch nemesis to the dinosaurs, giant meteors. If you've never looked into any of those, I realize a lot of them sound like cartoony science fiction, but I assure you, they all have mainstream scientific basis. Many of those things have already happened in the past. Earth's fossil record is full of mass extinction events, where most life on this planet was wiped out in a relatively short period of time. And it is almost guaranteed that another event like that will happen sometime in the future. It might not be for hundreds or even thousands of years, but we don't know that for sure. That's why it's important to start preparing as soon as possible, to make sure we're ready to deal with those events when they do occur. And how do we prepare for something like that? By advancing technology. 200 years ago, we didn't even know that most of those threats existed. Now we at least have the ability to detect them. And we might even be able to stop a giant meteor using, rockets and stuff. We're still very vulnerable, but technology has improved our chances of survival. and those chances will continue to improve so long as humanity continues to learn, create, and innovate. That's why the first pillar of my philosophy is science. Specifically, the scientific method, which is a system used to discover and confirm new information. Using the scientific method leads directly to newer and better technology, which in turn can be used to preserve our species. That means science is a good tool for accomplishing our goal. Now, as a result of this pillar, we have a new moral: truthfulness. Telling the truth is good, because the scientific method relies on accurate information. When you lie to someone or hide the truth, you create misinformation, which slows down learning and wastes both time and resources that could have been spent improving our chances of survival. This is true even outside of a laboratory setting. Because remember, these are pillars of society. The scientific method shouldn't just be used in labs, because scientific progress isn't just made by professional scientists. If you look at the history of knowledge, you'll find that many important discoveries have been made by regular people. It is always beneficial to think scientifically, because anyone is capable of making new discoveries. We are all scientists some of the time, and since the scientific method requires accurate information, it's important to be as honest as possible, as often as possible, to ensure that no one is wasting their time or energy on lies. Well, plus society in general runs a lot more smoothly when people tell the truth. Makes things a lot less, chaotic. But we'll get to that in a bit. For now, let's take a step back. While I could continue to extrapolate more morals from the scientific method, I think it's better to go back down the chain. You've seen how the chart works now. How our axiom lets us identify threats, how we use systems to fight those threats, and how those systems require certain morals. Now that you understand the relationship between everything, we can return to the beginning and start filling in the broader elements of the chart. Starting with the other clear threat to humanity's survival: warfare. With the creation of nuclear weapons, humanity gained the ability to wipe itself from the face of the Earth. A nuclear war could render the surface of the Earth uninhabitable. That's not an exaggeration. And we almost started such a war back in the 1960s. Of course, things have calmed down since then, right? I mean, the war in Afghanistan didn't involve nuclear weapons. There's no way that conflict could have destroyed humanity, so why would that kind of warfare be a threat? Here's the thing about war. It always leads to more war. World War II, the biggest, most destructive conflict our planet has ever seen, was a direct result of World War I, because it created the conditions that allowed fascism to rise to power. Now, most people know that the First World War was kicked off by the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, but not many people understand the reason he was assassinated. It was part of an ongoing conflict between Austria and Serbia that stemmed from the outcome of the First Balkan War, which was itself a result of the Russo-Turkish War, which finds its origins in the Crimean War, and so on and so forth, down through history. No war happens in a vacuum. You can draw a line through time showing how a series of small regional conflicts eventually led to the most destructive wars ever waged. So while it's true that the American conflicts in the Middle East didn't kick off World War III, they certainly didn't help. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan destabilized the whole region, leading directly to the creation of ISIS, which in turn led to the civil war in Syria, which worked to raise tensions between the West and Russia. You know, I've been working on this script for almost a year now. I started it before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And originally there was a long section here explaining how, even though it seems unlikely, these small conflicts can snowball into a war between nuclear powers. I've since cut that part, because current events have made it clear just how easily that can happen. Hopefully, the war in Ukraine won't escalate further. Hopefully it won't create the conditions for another bigger conflict down the line. But you can see how it could. The fact is, every time we go to war, we are taking a tremendous risk. We are tossing the dice and hoping that things won't escalate to Armageddon. Even if the chances of hitting that world-ending jackpot are low, we shouldn't press our luck. Not when the stakes are that high, and not when there are plenty of other options available. Warfare should be the last resort, something to be avoided whenever possible. Which brings us to the question: how do we avoid war? What system or systems do we use? I'm not sure there's anything that can completely prevent war, but there's two systems that can reduce it significantly. One is democracy, a system of government where the citizens control the country. It's a simple fact that democratic nations don't go to war as often as authoritarian ones. Because when wars happen, it's the citizens and their children who get put in harm's way. They are the ones who get recruited as soldiers. They are the ones who will have to murder and die for the cause. So if they get a say in the matter, they usually choose not to go to war. Now, of course, there are two pretty glaring exceptions to this: ancient Rome and modern-day America. Both of these were democracies, more or less, and yet both lay claim to a long stream of aggressive wars. The key factor in both cases is that these nations had the most advanced armies in the world at the time, able to strike against foreign nations without any fear of a counterstrike. This meant that wars were largely seen as non-threats to the population. Like, Rome had no problem sending their soldiers against the barbarians of Gaul because they saw Europeans as inferior people, who had neither the technology nor the strategy to threaten mighty Rome. Likewise, most American conflicts since World War II have been against much smaller nations with limited industrialization. Whether you're talking about Vietnam or Afghanistan, the perception from the public is that the US would be using helicopters and jets and missiles against nations that don't even have an air force. The expectation is a quick and easy victory with very few casualties and zero chance of any counter-invasion. Which is exactly the kind of safe bet you need if you want to convince a democratic nation to go to war. That's where the third pillar comes in: empathy. Seeing things from other people's perspectives and having respect for both their lives and how they wish to live those lives. It may seem strange to consider this a system, because most moral philosophies start with empathy as an axiom. Being kind towards others is often treated as inherently good. And while I certainly like being kind to people, it's fun, I recognize that my enjoyment is just an emotional response. And I don't base my ethics on emotions. Because they're fleeting, they change on a whim, and they can be manipulated. They aren't stable enough to use as a foundation. Instead, I treat empathy as a tool. It is a systematic way of looking at others. Not something I naturally feel all the time, but something I consciously work to apply. I choose to treat others with kindness, even if I don't personally like them. I try to be nice to others, even when they make me mad or sad. I respect people's freedom to live their lives however they want, even if I don't personally understand it. And I do this because there are logical benefits to treating people with respect. For one, it helps avoid wars like Vietnam and Afghanistan, which were massive wastes of time, life, and resources. Conflicts which indisputably made the world a worse place for everyone. If the majority of Americans practiced empathy towards people of foreign nations, if they considered their situations and had respect for their lives and their freedoms, then they would be a lot less willing to invade those countries and kill anyone who resists. Empathy combined with democracy is how you create lasting peace. When you have a government that is run by the people, and those people, as a rule, practice kindness towards others, then going to war is highly unlikely. Not only will empathy help to prevent and lessen warfare, though, it'll also help us to avoid other forms of violence. Because you see, external wars are not the only kinds of large-scale destruction that humans inflict on each other. There are terrorist attacks and mass shootings, assassinations, riots, and acts of vigilantism. These aren't usually as devastating as a war, but they often escalate situations towards war. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, for example, or the 9/11 terrorist attacks. These were not acts of war committed by another country, but they nonetheless led to actual war between countries. And while it's really easy to blame these kinds of attacks on people who are just crazy or evil, the hard truth is, most acts of mass violence are carried out by people who have legitimate problems that are being ignored. I don't say this to excuse their behavior. What they did was absolutely wrong. But it's important to recognize what their true motivations were, so that we can work to demotivate that kind of behavior in the future. The fact is, mass violence is often the last desperate act of someone who has nothing left to lose. It is something people resort to when they feel they have no other options left. And the best way to fight against that is to make sure people don't fall into that kind of hopelessness, to avoid placing them in unwinnable situations in the first place. Listen to their grievances, treat them with respect, and try to help them with their problems before those problems become extreme. Give people hope that things can change peacefully, and most of them won't resort to violence. In short, practice empathy and ensure democracy. Being nice to people and giving them a voice are not just good things to do, they are tools of violence prevention. They won't prevent all violence, of course, but it'll go a long way towards making violence a lot less likely. And it will also contribute towards stopping the third and final threat that is looming over our temple. You may have noticed near the start of this video that I said there were two-ish things that put our survival at risk. That's because while there is a third factor, it is fundamentally different from the other two. For one thing, it's much more nebulous than the others. Like, we can tell how long a war lasts, and calculate how much damage a natural disaster does. But this last threat is hard to measure in concrete terms, because it's less of an event and more of a concept. More importantly, though, this concept doesn't threaten humanity directly. Instead, it is a threat to society. It's not going to destroy the foundation of our temple, it's going to destroy the pillars. And while our species can survive for a while without a strong society, it'll leave us defenseless against the other two threats. I call this concept chaos. I realize that word has become kind of a meme in the modern day, but I can think of no better way to describe it. Chaos is the opposite of a system. It is disorganization. It's what happens when teamwork and communication break down. The more chaotic things are, the harder it is to have a stable society that can be scientific, democratic, and empathetic. The fact is, when people are scared or uncertain, they tend to make very bad decisions. Which is why it's important to reduce chaos as much as possible. Now, like before, when you want to talk about fighting a threat, it helps to think about what causes that threat. So, what causes chaos? A lot of things, some of which are necessary for society to function. Scientific progress, for example, means that things are going to change no matter what. We're always going to be getting new information. And any change is automatically going to cause some chaos. Likewise, practicing empathy means allowing people the freedom to enjoy whatever random stuff they like, which will undoubtedly create some chaos as well. You can't get rid of chaos completely without creating an authoritarian society that is also scientifically stagnant, and I don't think anyone wants that. As such, the idea is not to eliminate chaos, but to manage it, which can be a very difficult line to walk. Honestly, the mechanics of managing chaos could fill a whole other video, and perhaps one day I'll make that video. For now, though, the vastly oversimplified answer is, most of the things you instinctively think of as bad are bad because they cause a lot of chaos for no good reason. Murder, theft, lying, assault. Any action that hurts people adds to the chaos in the world. Because whenever you steal something or hit someone, even if you don't get caught, you make the victims of that crime more stressed, more scared, more paranoid, and thus more likely to act irrationally. And if other people see or hear about it, then the effect is transferred onto them as well. When one neighbor is robbed, the whole neighborhood gets worried. People start wondering if the same thing can happen to them. And as a result of that fear and uncertainty, they start acting out of immediate self-interest, instead of thinking rationally about the future. Think of it like this. If a company has their product stolen often, then they will raise the price for everyone to make up the difference. If one airport experiences a terrorist attack, all the airports will tighten security, slowing down travel all across the country. Even if you remove morality and ethics from the equation, things like theft and violence and lying are still bad, because people will react to these things in a way that makes life more difficult for everyone. This same principle holds true even when dealing with individual people. When you mock someone, when you hurt them, steal from them, make them feel lesser, they become less trustworthy of the strangers around them. And someday, you will need help from strangers. That's what society is. It's strangers helping each other out. And the more chaos you put into the world, the less likely you are to get that help when you need it. In short, whenever people experience pain, suffering, loss, it creates chaos. And chaos makes the world an objectively worse place to live. And since you live in that world, since you rely on other people to provide you with the goods and services that you use on a daily basis, it is in your best interest to not cause chaos. You directly benefit from showing compassion towards others, from treating them with respect, from not lying or stealing or hurting people. It is not only the right way to do things, it is the smart way to do things, the logical way to go about your life if you want to live comfortably, if you want this grand experiment called humanity to survive for another 1,000 years. But of course, those are all things you can do personally. Telling the truth, being kind, having respect, these are all morals. We still have one more pillar to fill in. What can we, as a society, do to prevent chaos? In truth, I should probably call this section safety nets, or welfare, because that's what I really mean. But a lot of Americans have been taught from a young age that those things are synonyms for socialism. So screw it, I'm just going to use that term. Essentially, I think it is our responsibility as a society to take care of one another, to ensure that everyone has food, water, housing, clothing, all the essentials of life provided to them for free. I believe this not because I'm lazy, not because I'm some bleeding heart liberal who doesn't understand that tough decisions need to be made, but because I realize that taking care of everyone's needs reduces the chaos in this world immensely. I would even go so far as to say it is essential for a stable, orderly society. I don't care how lazy or useless someone is. I would rather give them free stuff and let them be lazy than put them in the hopeless position of being homeless. Because nothing is more uncertain or more frightening than not having a home, or thinking you might lose the home you have. So much of the crime we deal with stems from people trying to make money. That is why people steal. It is why they deal in illegal goods, why they scam people. It's why companies mistreat their workers, why they resort to sweatshop labor. We like to think of murder as a crime of passion, because a lot of the high-profile cases are. But most of the murders that happen on a daily basis are motivated by money. And the reason people go to such extremes to obtain money is because they literally need it to survive. The fact is, our current economic system is inherently chaotic. If you can't find a way to make money, you're out on the street. That threat looms over all of us. The uncertainty of not knowing if you'll have enough for next year or next month never quite goes away. And it is so frightening that it pushes people to extreme lengths to get cash. It adds so much chaos to the world, and we should not tolerate it because there are alternatives. If we take care of people, if we give them a safety net and say, hey, it does not matter how bad things get, you will always have a home, and food, and clothing, then the fear that hangs over our entire society will fade away. And people will have the clarity to think scientifically, to participate in democracy, and act with empathy. Socialism is the tool we use to fight against chaos. It is how we add order and stability to our society, by ensuring that no one falls into poverty, that everyone has the support they need to keep on living. By doing that, we ensure that society as a whole runs smoothly, leaving us free to focus our efforts on what really matters, on making sure that humanity continues to survive long into the future. It is my desire to see the human race survive for as long as possible. I believe that the greatest threats to that are chaos, warfare, and nature itself. Through the use of science, democracy, empathy, and socialism, I believe that we can combat those threats. In order to ensure that those systems work properly, I will be honest, kind, and compassionate. I will refrain from violence unless absolutely necessary. I will treat others with respect and communicate my perspective to the best of my ability so that others may treat me with respect. I will do my best to be a productive member of society and work as a team for the benefit of all humankind, which in my case specifically means using my talents with video production to educate as many people as possible. At the start of this video, I said I wanted to give some transparency, to let you know why I make these videos and why I started this channel. Originally, I wanted to be an author, because I thought the best way to spread my ideas were through fiction. Telling stories is a slow and messy way to get your point across, what with readers being able to interpret things and all. But it's fun, and I thought I had time. The reason I pivoted to working on this channel and these videos is because in the last 10 years, all 4 of the pillars that I think are essential for humanity's survival have started crumbling. I've seen the growth of anti-science sentiment with flat earthers and anti-vaxxers. I've seen the rise of authoritarian politics, not just here in America with Trumpism, but all around the world. I have watched as religious belief has faded or become corrupted, leaving no widespread philosophy that advocates for empathy. And I have seen social policies that would save lives and bring orders to society decried as communism by an endless wave of corporate propaganda. In my eyes, society is rapidly falling apart. And if we can't reverse course soon, we have nothing to look forward to but warfare, destruction, and civil unrest. I would have loved to tell you a story full of action and adventure and comedy where you just have a great time and maybe you learn a thing or two about democracy or socialism along the way. But I don't feel like I have the time for that now. The fastest, most direct way to get a message across is to be the change you want to see in the world. To put yourself out there and show people exactly who you are and what you stand for. So that's why I'm here, looking into this camera and telling you exactly what I think will help. It's why I'm using my platform to communicate in the hopes that I can find allies who are willing to help me push for a better world. I realize this channel is small and that my influence is negligible. I realize that the actual effect I or anyone can have on the wider world is minimal. But I gotta do what I think is right. I've at least gotta try. So I'll continue to make these videos for as long as I can, until the world starts heading in the right direction, or until it's no longer possible. It's not much, but it's the best I can do right now. And I think that's all we can do, our best. Find whatever little ways you can to help make things better, and do them. Live a moral life. A life that you can be proud of, and hope that all those little efforts add up at the end. Anyway, I think that's enough for now. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me talk. I hope that this video could help you, even if it's just to provide a little entertainment. And until next time, stay safe out there.